Hello everyone, welcome to Indomitable Tech. This is your AIML consultant Shaunak, and in this particular video we'll be focusing on Python functions. So what are functions? A function is a sequence of code which gets executed whenever you call that particular function. So a function may or may not take in arguments. I'll emphasize more on what are arguments, and then a function may or may not return any value or objects. So I'll also focus on that when we are discussing how the function is created and how it returns a value. So going forward in this particular notebook, so format of a function. So a function consists of the word def, that's how you define a function, then name of the function, then the round brackets, the parenthesis, then arguments inside that parenthesis, and then the code block which will get executed whenever you call this particular function, and then the object it will return. So that is optional, similar to arguments. So this is how a function format is. You start with the word def. Let me zoom in here so it will be easier to see. So it starts with def followed by the name of the function followed by arguments. So arguments can be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it can be one or many. It can be any data format like list, string, tuple, dictionary, or any other object. Then followed by this colon. Then after that you give indent to the code. So indentation is required after this def. So it can be 2 spaces or 4 spaces depending upon how you are defining the indentation. So by default I use with 4 spaces indentation. So def, this first line followed by the second, third and fourth line which are indented. So the Python code understands that these 3 lines are the lines which need to get executed whenever you are calling this particular function. So here I am writing the code block, this addition equal to argument 1 plus argument 2, and the result will be addition minus 5. So this function is first adding these 2 arguments and then subtracting 5, and then this is returning one of the 2 things. So here let's say it is returning this result, this value that we are calculating. So this thing returning value or object, that is optional. So you can see some functions which are not returning anything. You can see some functions which are returning a value or multiple values, and then arguments. So arguments is also optional. So there are functions which take in arguments, work on that argument and give an output, and there are also some functions which do not take any argument. So let us start with example. So function without arguments. Let's see how functions without arguments are. So let us take few examples. So we will start with the word def followed by the name of the function. So let's say we write a function which returns a text value. So let's give the name of the function as a sample name, that will be the name of the function followed by a parenthesis, and this will return the text return this is a sample function. That's it. So this is a simple function, and now if we execute this sample function, it will return this particular line. So followed by parenthesis, that's how you make the function callable, and if we execute it, we are getting this is a simple function which we have written over here. Similarly, this was returning string. We can do that for numerical values as well, or other type of values like dictionary, tuple, list. So def, let us give this name as return list, and here we will define the list as inside this variable test list as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we will return this return this test list. And upon execution, if we call this function return list followed by a parenthesis, because this parenthesis is required for the function to get executed. If we do not add this parenthesis, it will return an object function main dot return list. So unless until we add this parenthesis, it won't be able to call this, and now it is giving the output as a list. Similarly, if I write this function def, let us square the number 2. So 2 square is 4, so let us write squa squared 2, not taking in any arguments, and here I will return 2 into 2. So every time I call this squared 2, it will, sorry, I did not give the parenthesis, and every time I give this parenthesis for squared 2, it will return 4, because that's how we have defined it. Now let us see the functions which do not take arguments but also do not return anything. So for that purpose, let me quickly create one dictionary. So sample dict equal to dictionary, and here I will write sample. Instead of that, let me define a simple dictionary. So let me give this 1 as 1. So this is a sample dictionary where key value is 1 and value is also 1. Now what we will do, we will write a function which will add elements to this sample dictionary, but their output, the value for the new keys, will remain the same. So def add keys sample dict equal to, so here I am adding the key, so the key will be length of this sample dictionary plus 1. So every time we are adding something, the key will get added by 1. So the next key will be 2, the key after that will be 3. So length of this sample dictionary plus 1 equal to, let's give it, let's say 3 square, 3 into 3. That's it. It is not returning anything. So if we see this sample dictionary, it is showing 1 and 1, but now I will execute this particular function add keys. I have executed it once, and now let us see this sample dictionary. So this 2 and 9 is added. If I execute it one more time, let us just give this a name, first execution, and this second execution. So this is executed second. Now let us see this sample dictionary. So this 3 and 9, this got added. So this is how we write a function which is not returning any value, but the code is definitely getting implemented because this sample dictionary is getting populated with a new key and the same value 3 into 3, which we have defined over here. So it can be any value. So instead of 3 into 3, we can also give the square of length of sample dict plus 1. So it will take the key and the value will be the square of itself. So these two cases we saw for functions without arguments. Now let us see functions with arguments, and at the end I'll tell you why we need to create functions. It makes the task very easy for us. So also, instead of writing a monolithic long code, we should always try to make our code modular. Code keeps the code flexible and easy to implement in multiple cases. So let us see function with arguments. So what we will do, we will take two numbers and then we will add it. It will be a simple addition function. So simple addition function def, let's give the name of the function as add, and inside this parenthesis let us define the argument. So let us say arg1, this will be our first number, and arg2, this will be our second number. So this arg1, arg2, it can be any variable you can give. So I have passed this as arg1 and arg2 followed by this colon, and then we will return. So we will add these two. So result equal to arg1 plus arg2. This will be the result, and then we will return this value result. And upon executing, let us now call this function add, and now if we do not pass any parameter here, it will give an error. Add missing two required positional arguments arg1 and arg2, because while defining the function we have passed arguments over here. So let us pass the argument over here. Let us add 3 and 5. So by default the position it takes is as per the position of the arguments that we have defined. So 3 it will consider as arg1, and 5 it will consider as arg2. And now if I execute this, it is giving 8, because 3 plus 5 equal to 8. One more way to define the arguments if you don't know what positions they are defined in. So add followed by, let us pass as arg2 as first. So type arg2 and then equal to, then you give it the number 5, and then arg1 equal to, let's give it 2. So this is how you, if you do not know the sequence of the arguments, you can type the name of the argument and then pass it the value. So upon executing it, I am getting the result as 7. So let us do one more thing. So here we have worked with integers, numbers. So let us write a function which will append a key value pair to our existing dictionary. So let us give the name as dict2 equal to, let's say, a, and this will be 1. So let's say alphabet and its number, and let us write a function which will take alphabet as the first argument and the position of that particular alphabet in the letter series A to Z. So def add, let's give it a name, add alphabets, and this will be alphabet, and second will be position of, let's give it just position, and then in the next line the indent, we give the indent and type in our code which will get executed. So this dict2, we are passing the key value as alphabet dot sorry, my bad. So alphabet, and then the position will be the key for that dictionary. And if we want to return the dictionary, we can do that, return dict2. Upon execution, it will show the current status of this dictionary with the updated value. So add alphabets, let us pass in the alphabet B, and B is second in the alphabet series A to Z. So on execution, I am getting this dictionary A equal to 1, B equal to 2. Also, if we remove this, the process will still happen. Now I have removed this, and then I will add here C, and C's position is 3. So upon executing it, we are not getting anything because we have not returned anything, but the changes will get reflected in this dict2 C which we have added. So this is how we are creating arguments and passing the arguments. Arguments can be in numbers, so it can be 1, 2, 3, 4. Multiple arguments can be passed. So for example, I have only taken 2, but you can also take multiple arguments. So let us see one more example. Let's say we have a text. So the sample text can be sample text equal to let's say Tom is a cat, and he is, let's say, 5 years old. And if you want to write several such texts about other animals, let's say on the next line, I won't save this in sample text, I will save it in next. Let's say Jerry is a mouse and he is, let's say, 4 years old. So the text is I'll remove this. So text, basic text is the same. So name followed by the species followed by the number of years. This he, I have kept it same, or let's say he or she, so we can change that as well. Let's say Olivia is a dog and she is 8 years old. So Olivia is a corgi, so from the famous Hammy and Olivia. So we have such text, but every time you have to type in similar kind of text. So instead of that, let us put that in a function. So define animal, and here we will take the first argument as name, then second argument can be cat, which is nothing but a species, 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 and then age. So let us text will be, so here we will use f string, so f string to substitute the variables. So first one is name is, I'll remove this a is not required. So f string of name is species, so name and species are variable, species, species. And okay, so since he she pronouns are also used, so let's say pronoun, so and pronoun, and she is age, years old. So here this variable will be age, and then we will return this text, return text. That's it. So now if I want to define a fourth animal, let's say we are defining Hammy. So Hammy is, let's say, 3 years younger than Olivia. So instead of writing the entire thing, I'll just type in define animal, and here I will pass in the name Hammy, and then species dog, and then pronoun he, and then Hammy is, let's say, 5 years old. And now if I execute it, I am getting this, Hammy is dog and he is 5 years old. So that's how we are defining the function, and when we are calling the function, we are getting this output that we have defined. So sometimes when we are using return, we are getting the output. If we are not using return, we are not getting the output. So whatever the code gets executed, that a code execution still happens, but if we don't use return, we do not get the output. So now if you do not know about PEP8, so PEP8 is a Python coding format, so it is assumed to be industrial standard. So when you go into actual coding, when your code will be used by other people and also be worked on, so that is, by worked on I mean modified and interpreted by other coders. So for such things you have to make the code readable. So the code needs to be as much readable as possible, so that without you telling that person should be able to read and understand what the particular code is. So as per PEP8 standard, we will modify this existing 3 lines of code. So while defining the function, the arguments that you are going to define should be mentioned as per their data type. So name is a string that we are passing, so you should write name followed by colon and type str. So str is the data type for string for this particular name. Similarly, species is also a string, so I am writing species, pronoun pronoun, pronoun. Now it is correct. So pronoun is also a string, and this age is integer. So anyone who is reading this will come to know, if I am supposed to pass the name, it is supposed to be a string. Similarly for species and pronoun, and age needs to be in integer format and not in float or list or tuple or string format. And the output that we are returning as text is also string, so you can define that. So instead of before this colon, type in dash and forward, means basically you have to define this arrow. So this arrow will be the output that this particular function is returning. So if this return is used, then give the data type of what you are returning. So in this case we are returning as string. So I have typed in as string, and if you are not returning anything, just type none over here. So it is not returning anything. So anyone who is reading the code will understand that this function is not supposed to return anything. In this case I will keep it as str, and then followed by enter the doc strings. So doc strings are nothing but after 3 double inverted commas you have to type in the documentation string, and then it should be closed by further 3 more inverted commas. So here I will type in what this function is doing. Returns a sample text string with the variables given through arguments. This will be the description of our function, and then we have to pass in as arguments, or some use params as well, params for parameters. So these arguments and parameters are both the same thing. So name, and in this bracket str, because its data type is string, name of the animal, then species, species, str, species of the animal, then pronoun of the animal, and then finally age is integer, age of the animal. And then this returns, write it under this returns. So string, it returns a string, and what it gives, the sample text with argument values. So this is how you are defining your documentation string. So whenever anyone calls this function, they'll be able to see this information. So I will show that as well, how this appears, the documentation string. Now let me just quickly execute it, and now if I write this define animal, and inside this parenthesis if I hit shift tab in Jupyter Notebook, if you are using VS Code or PyCharm, then it will appear automatically after giving this parenthesis. So in Jupyter Code, hit shift tab, and shift tab will give you information about this function, the function which we just wrote. So clicking on this plus, we are getting this signature, how the function is defined, define animal string. So doc string returns a sample text string with the variables given through arguments, the same thing which we defined over here, followed by arguments, name, species, pronouns, age, return string. So this is how the doc string works when you are dealing with functions. Now there are certain cases where you can give a default value to the argument you are passing through your function. So let me quickly give a default arguments, giving default arguments to functions. So the user can overwrite the default values. So giving default values, it should be values to arguments in functions. So I'll show you an example. Def, let's say normal value. So let's give this value. It will take value, and it is in this integer format, and it should return string whether that value is normal or not. So let's give if statement, if value lies between, let's say, 40 and 80, it will return as normal, else return abnormal. So if the value is between 40 and 80, it will return whether the value is normal or abnormal. So if I call this function normal value and pass in the value, let's say 10, it should return abnormal. If I pass it as 50, it should return as normal, because 50 is between 40 and 80. But what if I do not want to pass any value over here? By default it will throw an error. So by default I want to define a value, so it does not throw any error. So value, by default I will enter over here 50. So if no value is passed as argument, it will take this value by default. Now if I execute this, it is considering the value as 50 because no value was passed, so the default value will be taken. So such things when you are defining a function using multiple arguments. So some arguments are important, some arguments change, some arguments might remain the same, but in some cases it will change. So in such cases you can pass in the default value to the arguments which do not change that often. So let's say most of the times, let's say if we are doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and most of the time if we are using the mode addition, so let us define a function which will return the value as addition, subtraction or multiplication. So def, let's give it the name do math, and then we will say number 1 and number 2 and the name of the operation, that is addition, subtraction or multiplication. So number 1 we are taking it as integer, number 2 as integer, and this operation will be in string format. And I will not define the doc string in interest of time. So if operation equal to add, it will return number 1 plus number 2. Okay, and if operation equal to subtract, sub for subtract, return number 1 minus number 2. Else return, if not addition, not subtraction, then it will be multiplication. Return number 1 multiplied by number 2. So this is the function, and here in operation we will pass the default value as add. So if no operation is provided, it will consider this operation as add and return the addition of these two numbers. So do math followed by, let's say, number 2 and 4, and first we will pass this as multiply, and we are getting 8 because this is not satisfied, this is also not satisfied, sub is not satisfied, hence it is returning number 1 multiplied by number 2. So doing the same, do underscore math and 2 and 4, but I am not passing the operation value at this time, and if I execute this I am getting 6 because the default value for this operation is add. So it is adding the two values 2 and 4 to give the output as 6. So in this that's all for this video. We will quickly recap what we saw in this video. So we saw what is a function. So the function is nothing but lines of code that get executed whenever you call it. So a function might take arguments or it might not take arguments, and a function might return something or it might not return something. Then we saw examples of function without arguments and functions without arguments which return a value and which do not return a value. Then we saw functions with arguments which return a value, which do not return a value. And then we saw how to use doc strings and how to format your function as per pep8 format. and then we saw how to give a default value to the arguments in function. But make sure the default value, if you are defining it, so it should appear at the last in the list, that basically if you are giving multiple arguments, the default value, the argument having the default value should be at the end of that particular sequence. So if you give this operation before number 1 and number 2, it will throw an error. And now if I pass this non-default argument follows default argument, it will give an error. So here as well, if you want to follow this format, make sure all the arguments following the default value argument also have a default value of their own. So in this case, you can give number 1 as 3 and number 2 as 6. Now if you execute, it will work. So do math, it will directly give the output now without taking an argument 9, because by default operation is add. Number 1 is 3, number 2 is 6. So 3 plus 6, it is 9. Or if you don't want to give any default values to one of the arguments, then that argument should be at the beginning and not be after the argument which has a default value. So now if I execute, it did not throw any error, and it will take it will take the only one argument. So let's give it 1. So 1 plus 6, it should give 7, and we are getting 7. So these are the things which we observed in this particular notebook. If you want to contact me or have any queries, you can mention it in the comment section, or you can write me an email. My email is mentioned over here. And in the next section, we'll be looking at book number 7. So book number 7 deals with reading files. So I'll see you in the next video. This was Shaunak. Bye.